It's nice to see you, and it's wonderful to have our guest here, Dr. Raja Selvam. Thank you for being here, Raja. This is a webinar, Leading Edge Innovators, Somatic Psychology at its Best, Conversations to Inspire. And I'm very pleased that, Raja, you've joined us because you are one of my most inspirational mentors, and you have developed your own form of somatic psychotherapy, and I'm looking forward to hearing a lot of your perspective.
Thank you. Good to see you, and looking forward to the conversation with you, Abby.
Absolutely. So, Raja, what led you to being focused, I would say, or moving towards the practice of emotions?
The motivation came from my own personal need to get in touch with my emotions, to get in touch with a wide range of them, to build a greater capacity for them in order to heal personally, but also to grow spiritually, because of the requirement in the spiritual approach that a basic requirement is development of opposites in emotional experiences.
So when you just talk about the opposites of emotional experience, both of us are Jungian trained. And one of the things that one of my favorite quotes is Jung talking about holding the tension between the opposites. And this was actually one of the questions that I had been thinking about this morning to ask you, because one of the things that I really see you doing in your work is building a wider embodied container for people to be able to hold core affect. Much of the time it's difficult affect, right? Difficult emotion, whether it's been from a devastating personal experience or early developmental or even collective, right? Collective trauma. And in holding that kind of wider container of the core affect, something miraculous seems to happen, which is, what I think of as a flip. Like it'll move from being so difficult and arduous to being something that is transcendent or expansive or supportive. And I'm just curious about that phenomena.
How that happens?
Yeah, how, why, what your perspective is in that.
Yeah, I try to facilitate that, to build a greater capacity for the emotion, yeah, through the body. And the simple practice is to expand the conscious experience of the emotion to as many places in the body as possible, given the client's existing capacity. And you can think of emotion as the impact a particular situation or life has on our well-being. It would register throughout the organism, especially when it is a particularly difficult and intractable situation, psychologically. Yeah. And what we know, you and I know from studying different body psychotherapy systems, is that we form not only psychological defenses against emotions, defenses such as denial, but strong physiological defenses such as constriction or hypoarousal, etc. When we undo the defenses and make it possible for the emotion to be present in more places in the body, then it simply becomes more tolerable. I often give the following example. Is it easier for the body, for an arm, right arm, to lift a 50-kilogram bag by itself, or to also involve the left arm in it? In fact, the strain experience in carrying a 50 kilogram bag, lifting a 50 kilogram bag just with my right arm, is greater than when I'm lifting 75 kilograms with both arms. So that is the way I motivate clients to become curious about expanding an unpleasant emotion such as grief or the fear of dying to more places in the body, which on the face of it sounds crazy. But it is not. People then immediately experience that it is more bearable, that emotion, when it's present in more than one place, then it becomes more bearable. And they find that, and then that becomes a lifelong skill for them. There are also other reasons why embodying the emotion in this way, that is to expand the conscious experience of an emotion to more places in the body, actually improve different outcomes in different therapies. In order to look at those, we'll have to get into the science of it, so to speak. But for right now, I'm just motivating it at a very intuitive level, so.
It makes me think a lot of some of my personal experience during the pandemic. My husband works in the emergency room, as you know, and very early on, there were so many questions about, would he live? Would he die? Would he bring COVID-19 back into our home? We were busy writing our trust, and we have 3 little kids who suddenly flipped into
living with anxiety all the time. Yeah.
It was really high anxiety and stress and intensity. And I found that hyper arousal, that you're talking about, because I'm really trained, so I could lower it at small amounts of time. I could just have that, right? I could ground, I could orient, I could do self-contact, I could, try to think about things that gave me some sort of pleasure, and that would shift my physiology. But the thing that helped the most was really focusing on my larger container of my body. So I would feel my shoulder blades, I'd feel the backside of my rib cage, I'd expand my awareness kind of not down through my legs, but around.
Exactly.
And then I was just able to hold, okay, I feel life-threatening anxiety right now. There's not a much capacity to shift my situation, but it created it was almost like a softer vibration, because with the constriction, it was at a higher frequency, if that makes sense. And then once it was softer, I could almost spread around it. There's a little bit more ease in my cognition, and then that would allow there to be even a little more down regulation or a little bit more nuance in the movement through my day. So I'm curious, I just shared my personal experience, but could you share an example, like a client example of how this has benefited some of the people that you work with?
I will. But I just want to refer to what you just shared. So by expanding your awareness to more places in the body, while also holding on to the anxiety, you actually involve more of the body in the emotional experience. Right? That's what you did. Now, I would go one step further. I would actually get the anxiety into all those other places. As you sense more of your body, to get the emotion of anxiety into more places. And as you were talking, I just thought of a demonstration I did. I did a one-day course for Ukrainian therapists with Ukrainian translation. And I worked with 2 people, affected by the war. And one is a woman who was anxious, so anxious all the time that she couldn't sleep. And she had good reason to be anxious, because both her husband and son are soldiers on the Eastern Front, fighting Russia. And in a very risky area, and it made sense that she would be anxious. She was afraid that they would die any day, and so she couldn't sleep. So what can you do? We can only work with her to, contain that anxiety or tolerate that anxiety, to be with the anxiety and still get in a few hours of sleep. So what we did was, I asked her about, where the anxiety is, and we started, I don't remember exactly where we started, but we managed to, using different techniques, including self-touch and vocalization, etc. I can go into those later. We managed to expand the anxiety to more places in the body. Yeah, I don't remember how many places in the body, but as we started to do that, she started to report that, and we could also see it, that she was not as anxious. She was more comfortable. For example, her breathing improved. Her shoulders relaxed, even though she was sitting with anxiety. And she came to the insight that this is fear of dying. It is the fear of dying. Not only the fear of their dying, but also eventually the fear of her dying. Given, I don't know what history she has. So we did that. We did that demonstration, and then I was curious about how she was doing 2 months later, at the time when we released the course to the public. It's actually available free for people who can go to my website and sign up. It's Ukraine War Course. And we contacted her to find out how she's doing. And she said to us, I've been sleeping since the session. Yeah. And, however, I'm glad you called, because this week they're being moved to the southeastern part on a more dangerous assignment. So I'm getting more anxious, and I'm not, the difficulty with sleep is returning. So I immediately said to her, guided her to go to the therapist in Ukraine who saw this demonstration, so that she could repeat that experience, so that she could do it herself to some extent. So that's an example. I can give you plenty of examples, of that kind. Now, the reason why it works is not just because, the impact of the situation on the organism is spread out in the organism. It works because embodying an emotion actually improves the brain's ability to process the situation better, not only emotionally, but also cognitively and behaviorally. This is the scientific paradigm of research called embodied emotions. There's one of the scientists who has worked on this problem is Paula Needenthal at the University of Madison, Wisconsin. And there they did the following. Shall I go into this experiment? It's an interesting experiment.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what they did, they had two groups of people. They exposed them to the same situation, emotionally fraught situation on film, and had them, had their brains wired, they were tracking their brain through electrodes, both groups. In one group, they gave the instruction, please bite on a pen. The other group did not get a free pen to bite on. And they watched the clip, and then they were tracking the brain. And after the experiment, and 2 weeks after the experiment, they interviewed them with the electrodes in, back in, as to their memory of the situation, the cognitive details of the situation, yeah, and what they thought about it during the situation, what people were doing, what emotions were being processed, etc., etc. And what they found was that the group that was inhibited, from engaging its facial muscles, from being involved in the emotional experience, they were asked to bite hard. Yeah? So the facial muscles all get fixated. So they don't cannot participate in the emotional experience. What they found was that the group that was inhibited, their brain was not working very well. Overall, it was not stimulated as well, but specifically, so-called emotional centers and cognitive centers and association centers, they were all, dim. They were not working very well as compared to the other group, the control group. Yeah, and that reflected in the recall. What they recalled, what emotion it was, what the situation was, etc. After the experiment, 2 weeks after the experiment. And there are other experiments, if you have time. These interesting experiments, I'm sure that viewers will get a kick out of them. They also did other experiments with the rest of the body. What if the rest of the body is blocked from participating in an emotional experience? For example, if I'm asking somebody to process an emotion like love, which is a forward-leaning, it has a forward-leaning behavioral tendency, right, as opposed to hate or fear, which has an implicit, behavioral tendency to lean backward. If they were processing fear, for example, in this position, the forward postural position, the brain was inhibited. The brain did not process it well, as when it was consistent. The posture was consistent with the emotion. Mm. So when I read that, the technique was ahead of my discovery of the science behind it. Mm-hmm. So, starting out, I knew that the emotion is potentially a difficult emotion, or even like a high level of pleasant emotion, like love or great liking, impacts the whole organism. You feel good throughout the body. The only reason why one might not feel is because of habitual defenses against either the unpleasant emotion or the pleasant emotion. The unpleasant emotions are more defended against because the brain doesn't like unpleasant experiences. Freud talked about the pleasure principle, right? The brain likes pleasure, not pain. And so I thought, by reading Candace Pert, for example, that an emotion cascades throughout the body in the mid-90s, that I know that the emotion can potentially be throughout the body, but my emotion is not throughout my body. It's barely here or there. And it makes sense that if I spread it out, it should be more bearable. Let me try it out. This is how I got started. But I didn't know the effect it had on the brain. Now, you can say intuitively, yeah, if you stay with the emotion for a longer period of time, it gives the brain more time to process. But you have to find out that it is the case in the brain. And this is what the embodied emotions research brought me. So they established that if you block the emotion from being involved in the body, the more of the body you inhibit, the less of less effective the brain becomes.